You're sitting in a data center. The fans are screaming. The lights are flickering from the power draw. And somewhere in a rack in Stuttgart, a chip is doing math with light. Silently, coldly, using a fraction of the electricity. No fan, no furnace of heat, just photons. And in a recent benchmark, that German chip hit a number that made the entire AI hardware world stop scrolling. 5.58 times the performance of NVIDIA's B200 on a specific photonic workload. Now hold on, because that headline is doing a lot of work. And the truth underneath it is stranger, smaller, and somehow more important than the number. Here's what's actually happening in a lab in Stuttgart, and why the people building tomorrow's AI infrastructure are suddenly very, very nervous. The company is called Q.ANT, founded in 2018, spun out of the research labs of Trumpf, a German industrial laser giant, headquartered in Stuttgart, and their entire bet is one sentence long. Stop computing with electrons, start computing with light. Now the obvious reaction is, sure, photonics, we've heard this song before. Optical computing has been 5 years away since the 1980s. It's also wrong to dismiss it, because something specific just changed. Let me show you the magic trick. Inside your laptop, every single multiplication, every 2 times 3 your processor does, requires roughly 1,200 transistors flipping on and off for one 8-bit multiplication, 1. Q.ANT says it can do that same multiplication with a single optical element, 1 element. Read that again. The most fundamental operation in computing, the thing your GPU does trillions of times a second to run ChatGPT, collapses from 1,200 switches down to one beam of light passing through one piece of crystal. That is the entire pitch. That is why people are losing their minds. But how? How does light do math? Here's the plain English version. Imagine you shine a laser through a piece of tinted glass. The glass dims the light by exactly half. The light comes out the other side, and a sensor reads its brightness. You just multiplied by 0.5, with glass. No transistors, no clock cycle, no heat. Now imagine that piece of glass is a precisely engineered film of a crystal, called thin film lithium niobate, and imagine you can tune it electronically, instantly, to multiply by any number you want. That's the Q.ANT chip. That's the whole idea. The light enters, the crystal bends it by exactly the amount you programmed, the sensor reads the answer. Multiplication, done at the speed of light, with almost no waste energy. And here's the part nobody talks about. Electrons fight back. When you shove current through a transistor, the silicon resists, and that resistance becomes heat. That's why your data center has fans the size of trucks. They pass through the crystal, and they're gone. Q.ANT says their photonic processors generate no on-chip heat at all. 0 on-chip heat. That's not a marketing line. That's a physics line. And it's the reason every other number in this story exists. Because if your chip doesn't heat up, you don't need active cooling. You don't need chilled water. You don't need the building-sized HVAC that consumes 40% of a modern data center's power bill. Q.ANT says this lets them claim up to 30 times lower energy consumption for AI workloads compared to conventional CMOS hardware, and up to 90 times lower power consumption per application, and up to 100 times greater compute density per rack. Those numbers sound insane, so let's check them against reality. Here's the timeline. September 12, 2024, Q.ANT opens cloud access to its first photonic AI inference chip, the first time anyone outside the lab can actually log in and run code on a photonic processor. November 2024, Q.ANT announces its first commercial native processing unit, promising at least 30 times energy efficiency improvements. February 25, 2025, Q.ANT and a German fab called IMS Chips announced something poetic. They're upcycling an old CMOS chip factory in Stuttgart, the exact same kind of facility that made the silicon chips Photonics is trying to replace. Q.ANT puts 14 million euros into machinery for the new line. June 2025, at ISC, a major supercomputing conference, Q.ANT shows live demos. They claim 16-bit floating point precision with 99.7% accuracy for every operation on chip. That accuracy number matters. Because the old criticism of optical computing was always, sure, it's fast, but it's noisy and imprecise. 99.7% on every operation kills that argument. They also claim something subtle. Their system needed 40 to 50% fewer operations for the same output, meaning the photonic approach isn't just doing the same math faster, it's finding shorter paths through the math itself. July 17, 2025, Q.ANT raises €62 million in a Series A, money to commercialize. And then March 17, 2026, the second-generation processors get deployed at the Leibniz Supercomputing Center in Munich for benchmark evaluation. In a real production HPC environment, not a demo, not a slideshow, a working German supercomputer running real scientific workloads on photonic chips. This is where that 5.58x headline comes from. A real benchmark, a real comparison, a real chip you can actually run. But here's where I have to slow you down, because the hype is racing ahead of the hardware. Look at the spec sheet. The current native processing unit, power consumption 150 watts, throughput 8 GOPS, that's 8 billion operations per second, and NVIDIA B200 does multiple petaflops, that's millions of billions. The photonic chip today, on raw throughput, is not even in the same room. So how can the headline be true? Because the benchmark is per watt and per operation on the specific kind of math photonics is built for. Light is brilliant at one thing, matrix multiplication, the dense linear algebra at the heart of every neural network. Specific operation, the photonic chip crushes the B200 in efficiency. But on general-purpose compute, on the messy, branching control flow stuff a CPU does, photonics can't even play. This is the dismissal that the obvious reading gets wrong. People hear beat NVIDIA and think replacement. Q.ANT isn't building a replacement. They're building a co-processor, a specialist, a scalpel next to NVIDIA's chainsaw. That's why their chips are deployed at Leibniz in Munich and at the Jülich Supercomputing Center, not as the main brain, but as accelerators. AI inference here, physics simulations there, sitting next to traditional silicon, doing the one thing they do better than anything else on Earth. So what's the realistic timeline? Q.ANT's own roadmap is brutally specific. 0.1 GOPS in 2024. Target of 100,000 GOPS by 2028. That's a million-fold scaling target in 4 years. By 2030, they say, they want photonic processors to be a cornerstone of AI infrastructure. Is that real? Honestly, partially. The physics works. The chip exists. It's running in 2 German supercomputing centers right now. The fab in Stuttgart is being built. The €62 million is in the bank. But scaling a niche accelerator from 8 GOPS to 100,000 GOPS while keeping accuracy at 99.7% is not a marketing problem. It's an engineering mountain. Lithium niobate films have to be deposited perfectly. The optical paths have to be aligned to nanometers. The lasers have to stay stable across thousands of channels. Any one of those problems could push the timeline back years. But here's what's strange. Even if Q.ANT misses every deadline by half, even if 2028 becomes 2032, the direction is set, because every AI company on Earth is now staring at the same wall. The wall is power. GPT-class models are already running into grid limits. New data centers are being built next to nuclear plants. The marginal cost of intelligence is becoming the marginal cost of electricity. And in Stuttgart, a chip is doing math with a beam of light, generating no heat, sipping 150 watts, and quietly hitting accuracy numbers that were supposed to be impossible. So go back to that data center. The screaming fans, the flickering lights, the chainsaw of NVIDIA silicon eating megawatts to multiply numbers, and picture the alternative. A rack, silent, cool to the touch, a single laser threading through a crystal thinner than a human hair. The same math, a fraction of the power, no heat at all. We spent 50 years teaching electrons to think, and now, in a converted chip fab in Germany, someone just taught light to do it instead. The fans don't know it yet.